Well, Steve, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. While you were indisposed, if I'll say that lightly, Kash Patel was hosting for you and had me on a little bit about this, and I was incredibly grateful. It was such a huge response. The issue with this, for starters, is that it's a crime that is something that people don't want to believe. In fact, there's a film called Hard to Believe about it. I mean, we're talking about at-scale, state-sanctioned murder for organs. People, prisoners of conscience in the forced labor camps, in the dark black jails, in the prisons, being blood type, tissue type, medically tested ahead of time to the tune of, I don't know how many, but hundreds of thousands, if not millions, and then ready to be killed to order by the regime. And I might add, this is something we know has been happening at scale, something 60 to 90,000 a year of these transplants that are happening with really no credible organ source, right? There's no credible organ donor registry. We could talk about that.
When you say at scale, explain that to people. Well, your whole preamble, at scale, this is an industrial process. This is just not one or two bad guys trying to do this for money or some mad scientist at some jail or some prison. This is actually state sanctioned. It's an industrial process. It's very much like the industrial process to eradicate the Jews during the Holocaust was an industrial. If you've ever been to the camps, you see how the German engineering mind thought this down to the microeconomics of it. You're saying that this is the same type of thing?
Well, so that's a really interesting question, Steve. There's in 2020, the China Tribunal was convened by a guy named Sir Jeffrey Nice, and Sir Jeffrey basically got all the experts. And I would add, I'm not really the expert. There's a few out there that are, I would call the experts, like David Matus, Ethan Gutman. A number of people have dedicated their lives to this issue. Torsten Trey is another one. I'm kind of de facto an expert because I've been covering it for 19 years and I just know more about it than most people. But so here's the issue. The China Tribunal is the definitive body of information. They took a year to gather all of the evidence they could. ChinaTribunal.com, that's the website if you want to understand the breadth of this, the huge body of information. But here's what they struggled with. They asked themselves, is this genocide, right? Because this is a much abused word these days, but genocide is the intent to eradicate a group of people in whole or in part. That intent part.
Like the Holocaust.
Like the Holocaust, exactly. And so what they struggled with was, David Matus estimates it's about I think he said a $9 billion annual industry over there. So, there's a significant profit motive. So what they struggled with is, well, if there's this profit motive, maybe the motive isn't to destroy the group of people. So it might not quite be genocide. Maybe it's just a horrible crime against humanity. I mean, I'm being a little bit glib here,
right?
But that's the level of debate. The question is it, fully intentional? But of course, we know there's a level of intent because Jiang Zemin back in 1999, when he outlawed Falun Gong and said, in his words, eradicate this group. He wasn't necessarily saying kill everybody. Part of it was transform them, re-educate them, and if they comply, we can let them go. But what happens when you use that type of language? That's actually genocidal language, because if the people don't comply, and it turned out that the Falun Gong were unusually resistant to this horrible things they did to them. I won't even go into the details. I mean, like totally medieval methods of torture and horror to basically, all Falun Gong deaths, this was an unwritten rule, would be considered suicides, right? Because meaning you can work on this person, do whatever. The point was, when they turned out to be so resistant to this transformation, well, I guess it has to be death then, right? I mean, I don't know someone was exactly thinking that, but that's the logical conclusion. So, Bob Destro, former Assistant Secretary of State for DRL back in Trump 45, he believes it's a genocide, along with Tibetans and Uyghurs, Uyghurs are the official group that's being genocided in China. This is something we forget. We talk about making deals. We talk about doing this. It's very difficult to get someone to say, yes, a real, actual genocide is happening. Then an entire eradication of an entire group of people, we officially believe that. Well, the U.S. government believes that, according to at least one group, I would argue at least three, in communist China. So, you got to be careful when you're dealing with a literally genocidal regime.